All right.
We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies.
This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome, coaches. We are back together here at the 80-20 Baseball Podcast, the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass, trying to master the important things and then work from there. Speaking of which, we are going to discuss how we can master coaching the base running game, our base runners. I am going to share with you a specific tip that I recommend implementing into your scrimmage routines, your intra-squad scrimmages, or even a scrimmage against another team where there is no score being recorded, nor is there a spot in the standings that's up for grabs, first place, last place, in the middle. I'm going to give you a specific tip that I would recommend implementing to get the mindset for your base runners more aggressive, while also teaching them, well, I should say, showing them to test their limits and understand what their limits and capabilities are on the base path. I am going to also share with you a great article. Well, I'm going to share what I think is the key part of a great article that I got from Inside Pitch magazine. It's a great magazine that's provided, shared out by the American Baseball Coaches Association. And this article is an interview with the National Championship College coach, Chris Lamanis. Chris shares out some interesting information, some thoughts in this interview. I really liked what he shared out, the topics they talked about. And I'm going to take what I thought was the main piece of information, the most useful, all of it's useful, but the most useful, and share that out with you here. So if you're new to 80-20 baseball, I know a lot of you have been here for a couple years. You've been with us from the start. But if you're new, it's important to understand when we discuss the 80-20 principle and things like that, the 80-20 principle is simply a guiding paradigm. It's not something that we just wholeheartedly say, oh, we're only going to practice the 20% that brings us 80% of our results. And nor do we believe that ratio is ever exact, but it's a paradigm. And so we use this paradigm to give our players an advantage, our coaching a competitive advantage, and also just to have more fun and focus on the key things that really move the needle, whether that's a better, more positive, more fun team culture, whether that's developing better hitters, better pitchers, better catchers. Everything can be better by following the 80-20 principle. I read about a book a week, and I rarely go 2 or 3 books without somebody discussing or referring to the 80-20 principle. Now, these are nonfiction books. Obviously, fiction books and things like that aren't going to get into the 80-20 principle. Might throw off the plot and whatnot a little bit, but it is brought up so often. And that is what led me to studying the 80-20 principle and using it more as a paradigm. And I'm going to discuss next week a little bit more about the 80-20 principle and how it's useful across all spectrums of life. It's so useful everywhere in our life, and something I think we need to keep in mind if we want to be more successful and better and just live a better, more productive life, focusing on the key things. These tips here, the strategies, one of the things that I really wanted to get into, and there's a podcast that's not a baseball podcast, but it's a very interesting podcast. It's actually somebody who lives here in Boise, and listen to him. I like the motivation part of it. Very interesting. They got a company. I guess this company got offered $1 billion to buy it. I'm not going to get into the whole story behind the company, but I really like the message, the positivity. And I like learning from this person because they share out strategies that would help in any area of life. Also, they are evergreen strategies, evergreen tips. And that's how he refers to these strategies and tips in the business area and industries and the things in that kind of topic, that field of expertise that he's sharing out about. He's talking about evergreen, or he's sharing out evergreen tips. In other words, I could give you a whole set of drills, but that doesn't mean those drills are going to be useful with all of the teams you coach, nor all of the players. It may not even work for certain coaches that don't have access to certain equipment, or their field allocation, or their field time, or their practice time, or they may have a batting cage or 2 batting cages or no batting cages, a pitching machine, no pitching machine. They may have fungos, no fungos. They may have a plethora of baseballs. They may have 4 assistant coaches. They may have 1 assistant coach. Some of you have no assistant coaches. You may have coaches, or should I say players, that have played 5 years. Some of you have players, this is their first year. There's so many variables that if I just give you out, and I've done this in the past, this is how I started, by helping out coaches. I would give them drills, or I would give them suggestions, and then they would come back with always something to the effect of, well, hey, what about a variation for this? Or how would I fit it into here? Or we don't have access to that, or my team doesn't need that. Or every once in a while I'd hit the bullseye, but it seemed that it wasn't something that coaches really needed across across the board. So as a podcast, I really wanted to come out and share out evergreen strategies that will work with all your teams at all times, really more of a paradigm shift to give you the confidence when you walk out to the field, having that confidence, not needing to go to your toolbox and say, hey, well, let me go see what would Coach Bo recommend or what would this coach recommend. You already have a paradigm to see the problem, to see the challenge, to see the obstacle, or to see whatever it is you're trying to get to. And you have the paradigm, you have the operating system to fix it. Apps only fix or help you with certain things on your computer. The operating system works across the board. Without the operating system, the apps don't work. The operating system will work without the apps. So we're more of an operating system focus here, evergreen strategies here. So I wanted to get that out there. Let's get into the base running tip. Now, real quick, full transparency always and forever. I am going to be visiting family. I'm going to be out of state for the next couple weeks. I'm going to be visiting a big family. My wife and I and my daughter, we're big on visiting family, spending a lot of family time. Like you, most of you are coaching your kid. It's a family thing, so you can obviously understand. So with that said, I'm going to keep these next 3 episodes a little shorter, probably about that 20-minute mark. But I know there's a lot of information that we've given out, almost 4,000 minutes on this podcast. So there's plenty to go back and listen to. The next 3 weeks, the episodes are going to be right around that 20-minute mark, and then we'll jump it up. But in 20 minutes with no commercials, I cut out all the dead space. My awesome editor, Sam, already cleans it up. And then I come back through, clean it up some more to make sure that you get a really polished product. So 20 minutes is usually, without the commercials, already polished twice, is usually a pretty good amount of information for you to go out there and use. So I just wanted to be upfront. The next 3 episodes will probably be in that 20-minute mark, as I'm sure most of you can understand. I'm just hitting a little busy, heavy stretch here, and it is what it is. We want to keep this thing rolling. Speaking of rolling, you want your base runners to keep rolling out there. You want your base runners to get in the habit of not just being content at first base. We've talked about this. We've talked about no points. You know, say like Top Gun. I'm a Top Gun. You can say what you want about the volleyball scene and all the other, some of the cheesy stuff that's in. I love that movie, Top Gun. Can't believe that movie was made. I think it was 1985 or 1986. Amazing, amazing. One of the best advertisement jobs ever for the Air Force, Navy. I know that was the Navy, but flying jets, that probably literally doubled their recruitment. But love the movie Top Gun. Love it. Loved it. And in the movie, most of you remember, I believe it was Slider said to Goose, there's no points for second best or no points for second place. And Goose said the plaque for the alternates is down in the ladies' room. I feel the same way about getting to first base, second base, and third base. There's no points for first base. There's no points for second base. There's no points for third base. There's no points for anything. There's no runs. You can't earn a run until you hit home plate. There's no run that gets counted, as you all know, until you hit home plate. That is the only base, the only spot on the field that counts for a run. When the foot of your team, your players, touches home plate, that's the only one that nets a run. All the others are a part of the journey, part of the getting there. I understand that. And you have to go to first, right? You have to go to second and then third, or maybe not at all levels. I know sometimes those T-ballers in those, 7Us, they run to third base first and they run the bases backwards. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. But all right, for all intents and purposes, you have to run to first base and then second and third. I mean, obviously those guys, those kids that run to third, they're out. But nonetheless, it's always fun to watch them run to the wrong base. But you have to make it to first, second, and third, but you don't get a point until you get to home. And we've talked about this. Here's one way to push your players out of their comfort zone, to also instill the mindset that we are not content at first base. I think that as coaches and as a coach, I recommend you have a talk with any of your players, a nice talk, a kind talk, a productive talk, but you need to have a little heart to heart with any of your players that shows an uber amount of excitement for getting to first base. Outside of the kid who hasn't got a hit like in 5 games or 3, that's great. Okay, baby steps. But for everybody else, I've coached a lot of years, and every year we have a player that's pretty good or really good, and they get to first base and they are doing these signals to the dugout and doing all this stuff. In fact, they're not even back to the base. They're usually they've rounded the first base and they're walking back to first base while the ball is being thrown in from the outfield with their back, and they're cheering and they're doing all this and they're celebrating. Man, you got to first base. That's word 0. That's word 0. And I know it increases the chances of scoring getting there. I get it, but it's still word 0. I just get this sense that when I see players do that, they feel like they've done their job for the most part. Like that they've done it. They've accomplished their goal. The goal is to score runs. The goal is to score runs, not get on first base. That's the first step. If you can hit a double, even better, but get on base and then score from there. Never content at first base. And so when you do a scrimmage with your players, when you do a scrimmage with your team, I recommend doing an intra-squad scrimmage. Intra-squad scrimmages are you practicing against your own team or breaking it up or getting a team in your area and just doing something a little little more informal, something where you can do this and you're not going to ruffle any feathers. It's not going to cost you a win or a loss, things like that. I said, well, if it costs you a loss, it'd be great. It's not going to cost you a win. Tell your hitters that there is no singles. Tell your hitters that there are no singles on anything to the outfield. On any hit to the outfield, there are no singles. Of course, they will get thrown out at second base. Not every time, but they will get thrown out. You're teaching them to be aggressive. And it also teaches them, it also shows them their limitations. Some players try to take that extra base and they get thrown out by a mile. So this teaches them, this humbles them. If they think they're Benny the Jet Rodriguez and they're not, that could cause a couple extra outs every year. Almost every team in youth baseball has one player that's overzealous, that's a little extra aggressive on the bases, and that costs them a couple outs every year. So it is good to teach some of those kids like, hey, you don't have the speed to turn everything into a double, but it shows them and it humbles them when they do get thrown out in the scrimmage in a low-key environment. It also forces players to get out of the box fast. It trains them because there's no way you can turn a single into a double if you don't get out of the box fast. You can't sit there and watch your hit. You got to go. You got to round that base fast. You got to get around first and go. So it teaches an aggressive mindset out of the box. Some of the hitters are going to be surprised that they actually got a base hit out of it. There are so many times during the season, like Major League, which is on video and you can have access to these, and you can just YouTube hustle plays and you'll see a lot of these where the hitter turns a routine single that goes right to the outfielder into a double. Now, granted, it's not a rocket like one hop line drive right to the outfielder. Usually it's a ground ball, sometimes a slower ground ball to the outfielder, and they turn it into a double. And you're thinking, geez, I've seen that same hit 1,000 times and it's never been a double, but this guy decided to go a little harder. He decided to get out of the box fast. He decided to round first base hard. And it's a lot easier to teach kids to put the brakes on than it is to teach them to get aggressive. I really do believe that. So you can always tell them like, hey, this is the mindset we're going to have when we play a game. If you got to slam the brakes on after you round the base, great. But you're thinking double on every single hit and then hit the brakes when the defense forces you to hit the brakes. Not when it's too late. And I'm talking about in a real game situation here. You obviously don't want your hitters putting on the brakes when it's too late. Now they're going to get thrown out. Either they're going to back pick them, they're going to throw the ball back to first and they're diving back, they're out, or they're going to get thrown out because they're out in no man's land between the next base, or do they get tagged out like Willie Mays Hayes, sliding in and 10 feet short, second baseman, shortstop's waiting for him with the ball. So to recap, to back up here, to clarify this, I recommend in a scrimmage, this doesn't need to be every scrimmage, but I would recommend this with your team. You tell them, and maybe you just say, hey, for the first 3 innings, there's no singles, all doubles. Or you can even do this blanket rule, and this has worked well with teams I've coached. This is something that I highly recommend in the preseason or in some scrimmages that you can set up, even with other teams. If you're going to do this with other teams, you can tell the other coach, hey, we're going 2 bases on everything. You can tell them, especially if it's somebody just tell them like, we are going 2 bases on every hit. And that could be from first to third, or from second to home, or if it's the batter, from home to second. And you tell the other coach that your players are going to be going 2 bases on every hit minimum. Be upfront and say, hey, this is what we're working on. And then tell them the benefit of it. The benefit actually is huge for the defense because now they're playing against an uber aggressive offense. That's going to get them more prepared for the season. In fact, when you do this in an intra-squad game, this is really advantageous for your defense because they know they can't lollygag to that ball. They know there's going to be some pressure. They know there's going to be a base runner that's hauling butt to the next base, and they got to get that ball in. They got to get a good throw in, and they got to be on it. They can't just sit there in the outfield, wait for the ball to come to them, take a knee, and just lollipop it back in. They got to come up, and they know there's going to be some pressure. So it works both ways. But I'm just saying, if you do this against another team, just be upfront with the coach. Just say, hey, my guys are just for the first 4 innings of the game. We're not going 1 base. Everything is 2 bases on anything to the outfield. Now you can set up a rule on the balls, infield ground ball. I think it looks silly if you do an infield base hit and tell them to go to 2. I just think that's silly because, but hey, then if it's your own team, you could do it because then it sets up rundown situations. It forces a rundown. And if you do it against your own team, here's what I recommend doing. And if you can work this out with the other coach, I'd recommend doing this too. Tell the other coach, or if it's with your own team, you can just negotiate with yourself, which is a win-win deal. You would just have the runner, if he does get thrown out, he would just go back to the base that he came from. So if he's going from first to third and he gets thrown out going to third on a base hit, then you would just send them back to second. And when I mean send them back, you tell them to hustle back to second, and then the next hitter steps in. You get the game, you keep the game rolling. It shouldn't slow down the game, but it teaches them aggressiveness. And in this case, it teaches them aggressiveness to be over aggressive, to really instill that aggressive mindset that, no risk it, no biscuit, right? Bruce Arians, no risk it, no biscuit. You're also teaching them, like I said, their limitations. So if they do get thrown out, they know, well, hey, I can't turn that into, they'll find out quickly. They'll realize what they can turn into a double or stretch into a 2 bases or further. They'll see firsthand what they can and can't do. And that'll give them a gauge come the season if they can go from first to third on that, or from second to home, or they can get out of the box and turn things into a double. It'll give them a gauge. And if they get thrown out, send them back and keep the scrimmage going quickly. At least it doesn't penalize them, making it an out, because there will be times where they are thrown out because you've set forth this expectation, this rule. They're going to be thrown out in a game they obviously would not have gone. They would not have tried to extend that hit into a double or whatnot. And so you don't want to penalize them for something that you've said they've had, a requirement that you've set forth for the scrimmage. So a little bit of a caveat to that. I think you would just tell them to hustle back real quick, and then you get on with the next pitch, the next hitter, and go from there. I've just seen too much of the I'm content at first base mindset. I'm good. I got a hit. I'm cool. Point over to the dugout, point up to the stands. Everything's cool. Did my job. My batting average is cool. Got my stats. Not about the team stats, but I'm all about my stats, right? I got my stat. I got my hitting stat. Now I'm done. No. The only stat that counts, the only stat that matters, runs scored and runs given up. Those are the only 2 numbers that count outside of the most important number. And that is at the end of every game. How many players raise their hand and say they had fun, that enjoyed you as a coach? How many players want to come back and play for you next year? To me, that's the ultimate number. I'm on Twitter following the baseball community, and I would love to see people post, this many of my players came back to the alumni game, or this many players came back to the fundraiser or to my retirement as a coach, rather than it's always, hey, you got their 500th win or their 400th win. It's always about the wins, and that's cool, right? But why not another stat? We always talk about being people first coaches, and then everything I see out there is stats based on winning. Cool. I'm all for winning. 80-20 baseball will I guarantee it's going to help you win more games, but it should help you win with the players and make and create and build up and help facilitate more winning players that are winning people. All right, Chris Lamanis. I want to say it's Lamanis. Chris Lamanis, the Mississippi State baseball coach. They won the national championship. Some of this stuff is about, in this interview that I'm reading from Inside Pitch magazine, some of this stuff is about college stuff. It's specific recruiting and things like that. So I'm going to leave that out. But there's something that I thought stood out for all levels that was really interesting. The question was, and I'm going to paraphrase because the question is a little kind of confusing, but basically the interviewer is asking Coach Lamanis, hey, if you've missed on certain players, like if you've missed, in other words, you brought players in, you picked players for your team, you brought players in to be on your team. What are the reasons those players don't work out? What is the reason those players don't become the players that you thought they might be? Why do they fall short? So if you, as a youth coach, are bringing players on, picking players for your team, this is where this comes into play. So he said, I think most of our misses occur because of mentality. He said, so most of the players his program screws up on, in other words, they swing and miss on to bring into their program, he said, are because of the mentality, the mental makeup. I'm going to expand on this, or he'll expand on this as I read a little further. He said, I think most of the misses occur because of mentality, and I don't think it's changed. Sometimes you get a kid and you know what they can do athletically, but when they go out there, they don't have the ability to compete. So I'm going to interject here. He's saying it's not because they're athletically inferior to anybody else. He's saying these are good athletes. These are good athletes. These are good baseball players physically, but their mentality is why they were misses, not just average players, misses. In other words, they were subpar. Maybe they had to leave the program. They didn't cut it or, whatnot, or they never played or they never developed into the player that they should have based off their talent, athletic wise, their physical talent. He said it's the compete thing. This is something that is super important in baseball. And next week, I'm going to talk about a strategy that you can all use with your pitchers regarding this specific thing. So make sure you check in next Tuesday. I'm going to share with you a better way to pick your pitchers than the conventional way. And it has everything to do with what Coach Lamanis is saying right here. All right, here's what else he said on this topic. So you're looking for that competitive nature, especially on the mound. That's one of the biggest things I look for here because you have to play in front of a big crowd. That's part of it, but I just think competing in front of no crowd is super important. He said, in fact, to finish this quote, in Landon Sims, one of his really great pitchers who recently actually had Tommy John surgery. It's kind of sad to see that. A very competitive pitcher. When you look at him, you're like, he physically is a strong looking guy, but he didn't really like stand out as this, wow, look at that guy. He's 6'7" and built like The Rock. And he got a lot out of his skill. He said in Landon Smith's first outing of his career with the game on the line, he walked the bases loaded. And that's one of the tougher kids I've ever had. But you have to get used to that. Landon walked the bases loaded on a Friday, came back on Sunday and struck out the side. It's a process you have to get in, get used to. But I think that's the biggest piece. You need players that are going to compete. They're gamers. They're coachable. They're hustling. Now, you talked about competing, but it falls under one umbrella, one big umbrella. Gamers, they compete. They go out there and hustle. They play hard. Well, that base running drill is definitely going to get players to compete more. It's much more competitive. You're going to look a lot more competitive. You're going to feel a lot more competitive when you're trying to take two bases, trying to stretch everything into two bases that typically is looked upon as something that would net or yield one base. That's going to make you compete a little more. That's going to make you more aggressive. So Mississippi State's College World Series championship coach coming out and saying, hey, the players they've missed on, the players that they've had not turn out all that great were the ones that didn't compete. And I know this is college baseball, and I know these players are, say, 20 years old on average. I don't think 8 years makes a big difference. 10 years makes a big difference when it comes to competing. It definitely does on velocity and bat speed and some other things, and the amount of practice time a college team has versus a youth team and things like that, and the equipment and the facilities. But at the end of the game, 12-year-old, 10-year-old, they wired a lot like a 20-year-old. They're not that much different. They have facial hair, but competing is competing. So definitely something that you and I, we all want to look for in players. We want to take that kid who's going to compete over the kid that isn't going to compete, but is a physical specimen or this physical athletic wonder. Keep that in mind as you're looking for players and putting your team together this year, next year, and any year. I do hope you enjoyed the episode. It's great to see the numbers just really going up. It's great. And I'm getting just a lot of feedback. A lot of you have reached out and asked for that drill design guide. It's a no-brainer. You literally, the email goes right to me and I send it to you personally, this drill design guide that is about 10-page PDF that literally will shape your mindset to coach at any sport. I mean, it would work for any sport, any level, at any time. It's an evergreen strategy that will always work, and it will work for any level. It's essentially shaping your paradigm and understanding exactly what any good training drill needs to have to be the best it can be, to how to design it. Is it going to give you exactly what to do for a base running drill with a 7U team that has 10 kids out there and you only have an outfield with throw down bases to work with on a rainy day because the infield, no, but it's the operating system that you will just really make you as a coach prepared, fully confident to walk out there and go, well, I know exactly what a drill needs to have. I know exactly how it should be laid out. Okay, now you can piece things together from there depending on the equipment you have, depending on the amount of assistant coaches you have, the resources, how your field is laid out, if you're even on a field, how much time you have, and so on and so forth. Always great being here with all of you. Reach out. Go to the website, 8020baseball.com. You can just put your email in there and your name, and then it comes straight to my inbox. I check that. Ask for that drill design guide, or for any other questions, reach out to me. Let me know. We got the webinar over there, a couple webinars, a rules guide. 8020 Baseball got a lot of videos, a lot of articles. You will be better prepared when you go out there to coach. You'll feel more confident. At the end of the day, you're going to feel a lot more confident. Going out there as a confident coach, not necessarily guaranteeing a win or anything, or it doesn't guarantee you wins, but going out there confident, knowing and having an idea of how to handle situations and how to do things, how to set things up, man, that's a good feeling. And that's just what we're trying to do here. 8020 Baseball is to give you that. So go over there, 8020baseball.com, and we'll see you next week. And I think we went a little past that 20-minute mark. I just get fired up to share out with y'all. So with that said, we'll end it here. Take care of your health, take care of your families, supporting your friends and family, and take this information out there. Make the baseball community, make your team better, make the community better, make your players better, better people, better players, win, win, win all around. And until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.